Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Charles McGregor on the Riderflex podcast. Hello, Charles. How are you, sir?
Hey, Steve. How are you?
You in Denver or somewhere in Colorado today?
I'm actually in Santa Barbara. So most of our customers are out in California. It's where they grow most of the produce. So I got to be out there and get my boots dirty and rock around in the mud a little bit.
Very nice. Is baggage claim still outside or no? It used to be.
No, it is inside, although I haven't flown with checked bags in quite some time, unless I'm forced to. But it is a nice airport. You can get through pretty quick.
I remember the first time I flew in there, I think it was 2006, maybe. First time I'd ever been to Santa Barbara, I flew in there and the baggage claim was kind of like outside. I was like, wow, I called my wife. Like, wow, this is cool.
This is weird. It's like California, they break all the rules. Yeah, right. No, I think I've tracked it. I can get from my front door to the gate in 15 minutes.
Yeah, very nice.
Now, the problem is when you assume that's going to happen and it doesn't. And then which I've never cut anything that close, but it's gotten pretty close before. So
you don't happen to know, because I know you're familiar. You obviously you have a place in Denver too, and you're here a lot. You don't happen to know the Vernons, Mary Ellen and Tom Vernon, who owned Fresh Produce Apparel for a long time in Boulder.
The name rings a bell, but I'm not quite sure why. I may have run across them at Boulder Investment Group or one of the other groups, but the name rings a bell. But I don't know them personally well enough to tell any stories, unfortunately.
Only reason I bring that up is because they have a place in Santa Barbara, and that's why I flew out there. But I used to be a COO and a few other things for them back when that company was on operation, and I flew out to Santa Barbara to see them, and they still have a place out there. But anyway,
it's a beautiful place. I will say it can be a little sleepy at times, right? Like you have like a lot of college students and a lot of retired folks, neither of which are like, up at like 8 o'clock doing things, right? That being said, there is like Procore's down here, right? So there is more and more Peel Sciences down here. So there's more tech coming out, but it's an expensive place to live. So I'm actually moving up to Monterey here in the next month.
Oh, you are? Okay. Oh, really? All right.
Yeah, it's closer to Salinas, which is where all our customers are. So a little bit less driving. A lot of times I do like 7 or 14 hours of driving a week. I'm like, let's see if we can cut that down.
Yeah. Seriously, especially in California.
Yeah.
Like, oof.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Denver or Colorado? Where'd you go to high school?
No, we moved a lot when I was a kid. So almost all on the East Coast. So I was born in Chicago, and I lived in Green Bay, New York, Michigan, and Philadelphia is probably the place I live. That's kind of where I say I'm from. So that was middle school and high school in Philadelphia. So we were near Villanova, if you know the school, and kind of the main line is what they call it. But it's about, all those little towns, Haverford and all that around there. So that's where I went to high school. And the big thing is I played water polo. And so that's what got me out to California. So I wanted to play like outside in the sun and all that. So I played, so I went to Claremont McKenna College for water polo and everything else. Is that helpful?
Oh, very cool. So Claremont, is that Division III? What is that?
That is Division III. Yeah. So it's the SCIAC conference. So it's like Pomona and Claremont and Occidental and Redlands and things like that are in there. And so, it's interesting though, because for water polo, there's only 45 schools in the country that have like Division III or Division I water polo. It's probably up now since it used to be, but like we would play in the NCAA Final Four. So we go into playing like Stanford and UCLA and USC and just getting our ass kicked. Yeah, we would just get to, because like I remember one of my very first games actually as a freshman. They put us, they played everybody. We were playing, I think it was UCLA at the time, but maybe it was Stanford, and I ended up guarding like one of the whole sets, which is like the equivalent of like the center in basketball. Okay. And like, my coaches like push him out. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this person's got like 50 pounds on me and played in the Olympics. Like, I'm just happy to be in the pool. Like,
Yeah, right.
So it's always fascinating. They play all year round and have like big recruiting budgets. So it was really interesting. I definitely was not the best player on my team, but it was really great to play out
Are
in
you tall?
California.
Are you tall?
Not tall enough to play the sport I did, so I'm about 5'11". So there was at times I'm quick, but no, it definitely was kind of like going from the East Coast to the West Coast marbles, like going from minor to major league. So, but it was
still,
really fun.
hey,
it was really fun to play.
I always say, we're our day job at Riderflex, besides the podcast, is recruiting, right? We're a recruiting and staffing firm, and I always tell the team, I was like, look, if you're talking to an athlete that played any division in college, I don't care, 1, 2, or 3, if they played a sport through college, it's a different type of mentality. I don't care what the sport was. I mean, it just takes a lot of dedication, a lot of teamwork, a lot of people skills, a lot of work ethic. I just think there's something different about those folks. I really do.
I will say it's also was really interesting for me because I think up until the time of college, I would say like I was generally good at a lot of stuff. And so it was interesting to get involved where people started to specialize, right? Like we had players that their entire life was water polo, right? And they would wake up and they'd train in the off season the same amount of hours we trained during the main season versus, I focused on school. And it was a really great lesson for me just about like, you have to do some of that specialization work if you want to be competitive, right? So I was never the best player on the team because I wasn't putting as much work as some of those other folks. In the same way, they weren't doing as well in school. Right. I will say it also changed where, in high school, sport was fun. In college, it was a job, right? I played 6 hours a day, right? I mean, we were up at 6 a.m. for 3 hours of practice and chalk talks and all that. So it is really interesting. I will say my grades were actually better during season versus out of season because it forced structure. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Were you well now to get into Claremont? You obviously had pretty good grades, so that means you did well in high school. Were you a straight A student? Were you a rebel kid? Were you in trouble? What kind of teenager were you?
I think probably how I would tell this story maybe all my teachers wouldn't agree. I don't know. I would say like I was one of those students where if you said, hey, like let's learn about the concepts, I really loved it. I definitely did not like regurgitating information, right? So I wasn't big on one, I'm dyslexic, so I'm very, very dyslexic. I couldn't read till I was in like 3rd grade. So the whole process of like memorizing scripted stuff doesn't work well for me. And so I'd say the teachers that wanted students to really engage with the material, we were great along with each other. The ones that wanted people to be kind of in that fixed sort of pathway, I maybe was a little bit more difficult. So I would say I also, luckily my family, they always were really big on, asking questions, why are we doing it this way? Really engaging. And some teachers love that. And some teachers say things like, well, I'm the teacher, you have to.
Yeah.
I may or may not have picked some fights around that. What I would say is it took me until really probably like late high school, college to realize like, that that the game there is to play the game, right? The game with those folks is a different game, and it took me a little while where I really wanted to say like this is how I see the world. Let me point out my point of view. Let's have this debate versus just like, is it really? This is a speed bump. Like let's just get the A and move on, right? So I would say I was sort of like B+, A- student, maybe an A in classes I really engaged with. I was big into STEM. I really liked those classes.
Okay.
But I definitely wanted to do things my own way, right? Like I would always want to do things my own way. So,
were you ever get in any major trouble? Did you ever have to call dad from the sheriff's office? Anything cool? Anything?
A couple of times. Nothing too bad. I do remember like in elementary school, I mean, our school was pretty tightly buttoned up. So I went to this school, it's called the Episcopal Academy. It's a private school. So we had to wear like ties and dress shirts and stuff like that. In elementary school, I got into a few fights. I didn't like bullies very much. And so some kid, and I was like, my dad's from Texas, my family's from Texas. And we don't, his whole thing was like, never throw the first punch, but like if someone throws at you, like, you win the fight, right? Like, so like in elementary school, middle school, like that was sort of a Texas thing that got brought over to like the East Coast. They don't have the same sort of dynamics.
They don't. No, they don't.
No. So I may have been called in a couple of times, and I will to, you know, my father's credit, he was kind of like, I don't see the problem here. You know, he's like, well, did you step in to stop it? Asking the teachers. No. Like, well, did he start the fight? No. He's like, then I don't see the problem here, you know, like, but that being said, right, like, I don't think any too bad. I never, you know, never cops or anything like that.
Okay.
No, so I'm a pretty good kid.
Was your dad an early entrepreneur and investor? Tell me about your folks a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah. So both parents, you know, really close family. So I'm an only child.
Okay.
So Andrew, he actually started out in psychology. He did, content analysis for schizophrenic alcoholics in the Texas State Mental Hospital, which is as difficult as it sounds. Now, this is back in like, you know, back when they were like spraying people down with hoses in mental hospitals, right? Like, you know, like this is old school Texas, right? So what you do is you write down everything, and you're trying to figure out of the rambling, right? Like, what is the content that you can use for clinical work? He realized pretty quickly that wasn't the right fit for him. He didn't, you know, it's pretty emotionally draining work, right? I mean, it's really hard to watch that. Yeah, so he got involved with a company called Herman Miller as a salesperson. And this is back, he had long hair. He's kind of like a hippie.
You talking about the Herman Miller that makes office chairs and all that? You talking about the furniture company?
Yes, I am. So he started with them when they were $20 million. And then he went up to them, and by the end, he ended up running Europe. He ended up running the whole thing as the COO. His first project, not his first, but one of his major projects was the Aaron chair, which is probably what you're so familiar with. He started he started their healthcare business. He started their retail banking business with them, took over Europe when there was 14% unemployment, and they had, you know, 16 countries, right. You know, and before EU stuff. So, you know, sort of, I like to call him, he did really a lot of like entrepreneurship, I think is the term.
That's
right?
so great. That's so
really
great. What year did he leave there? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that question.
That's such a good question. I wish I knew. After Herman Miller, he went over and worked for Warburg Pincus that took over Knoll, and then he was at KI. So couple different furniture companies.
Knoll's another office chair company.
Yeah. So I'd have to get the exact information. I actually don't know off the top of my head. But I want to say sometime in the 2000s, something like that.
I wonder if I visited, because I've been to the Herman Miller facility. In fact, I got flown in there. They have like a special guest house where
in Holland, Michigan.
Vendors can stay. Yeah,
we lived in Holland, Michigan. So, like I said, we were there for a little while. So, you actually could have run into him. So, a big thing for him was, you know, the sort of participative management, right? So getting all of their factory and all their workers to really feel like they have a part. And because when he took over, right, they had like 0.25% margins, and it was about how do we, you know, the CEO was like, well, what do we do? It's like, well, we got to do some innovation, and we got to get our costs down, but we have to get the people who are as close to that factory line participating and making those improvements. And so actually Herman Miller was one of the few that never got unionized, not because they were doing union busting, because when the unions came in, all the workers said, like, I don't need you, right? Like, I have a direct line to the people that can make my life better, and I'm a part of this company. So, you know, that's really, you know, and he always talks about his brightest moments, and it's something that kind of formed what I think about is when he paid everybody a 25% bonus throughout the entirety of Herman Miller, right? Like, that's, you know, pretty amazing. And
well, you can tell your dad this story, and this is true. I've said this many times to people. I have seen and been involved with a lot of different companies, either as an employee or an executive or a vendor or whatever, right? And I'll be 56 this summer, so I've seen a lot. And I have told people so many times, I said, look, here's the deal. 99% of companies on planet Earth are messy to some degree. Primarily because there's humans involved. But when I went to the Herman Miller facility, I was blown away. I mean, you talk about a buttoned up, well-oiled machine. I came out of there going, oh, wow, okay.
They worked really hard. They had Toyota actually come through, and they, the sort of lean manufacturing.
I
They
believe it.
had them do the walkthrough and about how do you stream all the parts in so that you have little floor space. It's actually part of what we're trying to help our farmers accomplish in its own way. A little bit different, but that supply chain management and that kind of real time. So it's been great to work with him. As you know, I work with him currently, so he's not out of my life by any means, and he's been a huge mentor and friend, and he's my best friend, he's my mentor, he's my dad. We have all those different relationships, and
that's so cool.
And he's my partner in our business too. So it's been great.
Before we get into that business, tell me about your mom a little bit.
Yeah, well, she's the best version of all. She's the best one out of all three of us for sure. So I'm trying. She's incredible because she's done so many different things. She's run businesses, dry cleaners. She's been a teacher. Right now, actually, one thing is my father retired when I was in middle school, high school, and my mom went back to school for marriage and family therapy. She went to UPenn.
How about that?
And so she's been a marriage and family therapist now for, call it, 15 years. And really is a fascinating addition to our, because we sit around the table and talk, as you said, about people, right? Managing people and the complexity, whether it be sales or whatever. And she has such an amazing read and insight into, and has taught me so much about how so much of what you see in people is really formed from, their family and where they grew up and all of these other pieces. And that she's helped coach me away of some of those things where there are some things about people you can change, and there are some things that are just in there. So she's actually the final due diligence check for all our investments.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
If she reads them and she's like, I don't like it, we're like, all right, there's something there. We got to go figure that out.
Please tell your mom I said this. I appreciate all the AI, and your company's tied to tech in many ways, right? But when it comes to people decisions, man, it's a human game. And it's people like your mom that are like, I want to see Johnny. I want to talk to Johnny. I want to look at Johnny in the eyes. I want to get a vibe. I want to read his character. I want to have a judgment. I'm just telling you, it's a human, so many things back to the messy company situation. And we were having this conversation earlier today as a team. It all comes down to the human element. Eventually, if there's a mess going on, or there's some going on,
absolutely,
it all comes back to the people and the communication and the human connection. All of it.
And I feel like half the time, also now, it's like I think about how whether it be on Zoom or Slack or all this, like the problems that appear are technology created. Like they're not. I'm like, I sit there and we have personnel issues. I was like, if y'all two had this conversation in person, there would be no problem. Like this would not have happened at all. And it's amazing because my mom was talking about with clients during COVID, they went to remote only, right? They had these HIPAA compliant platforms. And it was really, she said, there were clients that I worked with for 6 months or 8 months. And the minute I met them in person, I had a completely different read on where to attack the problem, right? Like what the actual issue was.
Yes. How many times have you called your people? If I see an email exchange 2 or 3 times and people are trying to have a car, I will pick up the phone and say, stop. Call him right now.
Yeah. Well, and it's big with farmers, right? Because farmers, they do not like texting. Yeah. They don't like emails. They're like, either shake hands with me or give me a call. And it's actually been a challenge for our kind of junior sales, folks. I believe it. Some of them, they don't want to pick up the phone. I'm like, just call them. It'll take just 5 seconds. They're like, well, should I write notes before? I'm like, it's not an interview. Just like pick up the phone. Like, it's like, I worry about y'all meeting your significant other at a bar or something. Like, so it's been really interesting. She's been great at kind of helping us understand all of that piece. And she's great because she's done so many different things that her clients love the fact, she's run businesses so she can have those kind of clients. And I think a lot of, she's had a full scope of life experience, which is often helpful for your therapist, right? So
where did the entrepreneurial bug, how did that happen for you? Because your dad he had, like you said, he was an entrepreneur, but how'd that happen for you?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question because I don't always have a good answer for it. I'd say, so right out of college, I did a couple of different things, but one of the things I started doing was doing early stage venture investment with Andrew, right? So we have a family office, and part of what we did, we invest in companies that probably Denver Angels, some things like PharmaJet is a really common company that people share. Yep. We love Heather.
Heather was on the podcast. Yeah.
Oh, she's fantastic. I mean, anything, like I would elect Heather over me on a podcast at any point in time. She's incredible.
She's coming back. I got her scheduled. I think it's next month.
Well,
But anyway,
let her know. She actually we share an alma mater. She went to Claremont as well. So that's one of the reasons we got connected. Cool. So one of my first deals I ever personally, kind of led for RVC and all that group was PharmaJet, because my background, my degree's in biophysics. So I love her company and I love what they're doing over there. Anyways, so we got involved, and I think what happened was, first thing I did, right, like out of college, was I was in these investment conversations with people who were like yourself, successful business people who have 30, 40 years over me in terms of career expertise. Yeah. And I felt very, not necessarily out of place in that room, but I knew that, that I had to listen more than I spoke. And my kind of rule, especially was in any of those meetings, I was like, you only get to say one thing, and the thing you ask better be a question, and it better be a good one. Like it better, and if you can't come up with a good question, don't talk. And so I remember my first year in that, I think I read like 150 books. It's like trying to just like absorb as much information as I could.
Great, good job.
And what I realized though was that a lot of it was like parroted information, that it didn't have the experiential content behind it, right? Like I could create these amazing frameworks, and I got a lot from Andrew from listening to his stories and working with him, but it's not the same as having done it. And I think what happened is we kind of ended up falling in love with this industry and this company. And then through my process of kind of running the company along with Andrew and Jeff, I realized like, actually, I'd much rather be a part of operationalizing those things than the sort of point and shoot that comes through investment. Yeah. And I think if you want to be a great investor, if you haven't done it, it's not that it's not possible. There's plenty of investors who have not been entrepreneurs that are good at it. I think it's really hard to learn the lessons, right? It takes maybe 5, 7, 12 years to learn some of the lessons from portfolio companies, because that's how long it takes them to do well or not, right? So that's kind of what came on, and I definitely like being a part of it.
I see. So GeoVisual was originally an investment for the family office, and then you started diving. I got you. Okay.
Yeah. The way I always tell the story laughingly is we got involved. Jeff is one of those unique founders that knew that they needed help, which is, I think, a unique thing, right? Generally.
Definitely. But that's a whole other podcast episode.
That's all. We can talk about that. But like he's, technical founders that believe they can do all the business side, right?
Yeah.
And then, 20 hours became 40 hours, became 60 hours. And I think we fell in love with the industry. We see how clearly the problems are. Maybe there's a little Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. But all of those things, and I definitely just really enjoy that getting into depth into something.
What is it about the ag farm field crops? Where's that emotional tie for you?
I think part of it, right, is just like, I eat, you eat, and I watch our food system and our environment, and I worry about it, right? I mean, I hope to, have kids one day. I hope that they're going to be able to have fresh produce. I hope they're going to be able to see fields and see the work that we can put into the ground. And the truth is, we don't have that many more years to do it the way we do it right now. And we need innovation to kind of keep up with that. So there's that piece. Actually, my grandfather, his job, he was a peanut futures broker. So what they did, right, is they sold future contracts to like planters and things like that. So I had that connection. My great uncle was a cattle rancher. So we have some ag background, not necessarily in produce. But I think what we love about these people is that they really are stewarding the land, or trying to, the best they can. And you can go and if you shake hands with them and treat them with respect, you get to learn all these amazing lessons about how the food that you and I kind of take for granted shows up in Whole Foods, Walmart, wherever, every day, right? Yeah. So that's been really great, just to kind of meet that kind of big variety of people.
And not only are they teaching you about crops, but don't they just remind you just how to be good to people and just how to act as a human being versus some of the other folks you meet in business?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I can't say that I know too much about every industry by any means, but I will say that if you come in with respect, they will absolutely send that back to you. And the first conversation always starts with a place of respect, versus there are other places, you can walk into like bankers and they're like, what the hell do you want? So it's been really great. And I think, you see all these news about how they treat farm workers, all this stuff. And I think some of it, I don't think they've spent the time to really talk with the growers. Like, I think, if you only talk to union reps, or you only talk to somebody whose job is to make a story out of it, I watched them, during COVID. They were buying hotel rooms and buying hotels up to get these people. They were buying masks. They were trying to, they want to, this is their life. Their life is that land. And it's not just like a publicly traded company. This is like their great grandmother and grandfather's business, right?
Yes.
Like so it's been interesting. I think that they get a bad rap, especially in California.
They do sometimes. I think the other misconception is that they're just farmers and they just play in the dirt and they don't know about business. But I'll tell you that's not the case. I live in Weld County. I live up in Weld County, where in Johnstown and near Greeley, where the farmers live. And the little tavern down by my house where I go, the watering hole where I go, there's lots of farmers that come in there. And let me tell you, they know a lot more about business than you might think. You get
they love my favorite term is they go, well, I'm just a dumb farmer. And anyone who believes that, you're immediately out. Like, because they're saying, and the term snake oil salesman comes from ag, right? I mean, it comes from people selling stuff, right? And their sense, like, they do not like sales, but like, I do all of our customer facing stuff. And part of the reason is, like, I don't smell like a sales guy because I'm not, right? My background's in biophysics. Like, I'm there to be a partner to them. And when you come in smelling like a salesperson, they're like, why are you here? I can tell you just want to sell something and dip out. I'm not interested. Right. It's been great in that way. It's not to say that, do I think they do everything right? No, but they are sharp business people. And I think they're like really, truly like some of the first environmentalists, because, if you ask them, like, they don't want to destroy their land. That's like, that's a producing asset, like that's their, so. Yeah.
Is it true that, and I don't know, I'm ignorant on the stat, but are more and more of the large farms selling to institutional money and then letting the family stay on to, quote, manage it? Are you seeing more and more of that, or?
There's kind of mixed results there, right? So you're talking about, like, whether it be private equity funding or something getting involved. I can't speak to commodity crops. So, for content, kind of, we only work in specialty crops. So we work in like perishable crops, things you buy in the produce section. So I can't speak to, cattle and corn, wheat, soy, and grains.
Okay.
We have seen some purchases. So a company called Tejas bought Grimway, which you may recognize as Cal Organic or Bunny Love. They're one of the largest carrot growers. Bolt House has been bought and sold. One thing you see pretty commonly is these private equity companies purchase them, but one of the things they don't know as well is the ag side. And one thing in ag is that a lot of knowledge is often trapped in individuals. Like,
no doubt,
that person is the only person who knows how our varieties work in Santa Maria. Like, that person's the only one who knows our irrigation program in Coachella.
That's true.
And what happens is, on a spreadsheet, if you're like, some junior analyst at one of these private equity companies, you're like, well, like, that's redundancy here, that's redundancy here. And they remove them. And then the business, like, just doesn't perform. And then, so Bolt House was like bought and sold twice by like the same person. Like, they like kind of sold it, bought it back. I think Tejas is going to do really well because they've kept the kind of core management at Grimway there. And I think they have an ag background. So there's another firm where we've talked with a couple of times called Arable Capital, that they participate in some of this stuff. And one of their managing directors used to work at Bolt House, right? So part of it is like they know enough to know what to change and what not to change.
Is the family office investing in farms or facilities or anything, or no?
Yeah, right now in terms of ag, we're focused with GeoVisual. That's where if we're putting money into ag, we do some investment into multifamily real estate, some other stuff. But I would say in terms of our high risk part of our portfolio, we're pretty fully extended on the startup thing. So and the truth is, we're not growers, right? So I would never we would never buy ag land or anything like that unless I really knew that grower well and they were going to stay, right? Like that's. I think if you think that you can take over and you don't have that ag background, it's not that you won't figure it out, but you're going to go through some learning pain for sure.
So the reason I got to Colorado was because I was recruited to be the director of sales and marketing for Color Star Growers, which is no longer in business. This is back in 2005 or something like that. Anyway, pretty big facility, about $100 million facility. Anyway, they grew bedding plants for Lowe's and Walmart, etc. Walking through the greenhouse with the old man was like I wish I could have filmed it all. I wish I had it all, to where you could go back and watch it. Just watching him maneuver and point, 50 yards away at a plant and say, hey, that needs this or this or that, you know, and he just could feel and knew visually what needed to be done. And he wasn't even standing next to the pot hardly. I mean, just the generations of knowledge.
I mean, it's true masters, right? I mean, it's
unbelievable.
Like, you know, it's not just like 10,000 hours, right? It's like 10,000 hours in the generational compounding.
Yes.
It is really incredible. What I
Unbelievable.
always say for our company is like, I tell our growers, I'm like, what is your plan to make sure that doesn't get lost? Is there a way that you can, you know, these people are aging out. Can you digitize some of that expertise to help the next generation? Because the question is, do you really have 30, 40 years for some student out of Cal Poly or UC Davis to come up to speed on forecasting lettuce? Like, probably not. Right.
Especially,
like, you know,
especially if their children have gone on to do other things and they don't want to follow along. Right. Then
that's a really common one too. So this next generation, there's a lot of folks, right, where like fundamentally, right, the next generation, you know, folks my age, they don't want to walk the fields anymore. They're like, yeah, maybe I want to be involved, but I want to be working with data, or they're like, I want to go live in San Francisco and work at Apple. Right. So that's been a problem too, is just like retaining and attracting young talent. And the other one is that fundamentally, you're not going to make as much money in growing as you are to go work as a software engineer in San Francisco. So there's that piece too, right? They just can't offer. I will say, to the credit, everyone talks that way. I will say I've had more and more luck recently, and you know this from the recruiting piece. We've had more and more software engineers that are like, look, I could go make a lot more money and put cat ears on people for TikTok, or I could work for you and feel like I have an impact on the world in a good way. And I love to hear that, because I do think it's happening. I do think people are like, look, if I'm going to spend my intellectual capital somewhere, I want to spend it in something that makes the world a little bit better. So
I like that. That's a good line. Why don't you, now's a good time. How about, by the way, do you refer to it as GVA?
Yeah, I talk about GVA or GeoVisual, sort of the two that I always think about, but yeah, whatever. I know it's fun.
GeoVisual.
We probably could work on our marketing. Yeah.
Well, I was kind of wondering how you refer to it. GeoVisual-analytics.com, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Give us the elevator pitch and then kind of walk us into it. Yeah.
I should be better at this because we're raising capital, but yeah. So, you know, GeoVisual Analytics, we do supply management for specialty crops, meaning perishable crops, right? The things that you eat in the grocery store. Okay. And that's through kind of two parts of our business. We have advanced analytics and forecasting that uses drones, planes, satellites, weather data, historic data to help them figure out how much is going to be ready, when it's going to be ready, where it is, and help make decisions to improve that process. And then a suite of digital tools to help them implement those changes, right? So things like getting them off of PDF ranch maps into a digital kind of geospatial database, help their scheduling tool that helps them organize their, you know, weeding, thinning, irrigation, fertilizer, all of those things. But really that our kind of competitive thing is focus differentiation, right? We really focus on our kind of market, and we don't try to go corn, wheat, soy, and grains. We try to focus there. Is that a good enough elevator pitch?
Yeah, pretty good. Let me hit you with a bunch of questions now.
Yeah, I love that.
Are they, so is it a SaaS company, SaaS tech ag? Like, how do you bucket yourself?
yeah, I'd say, you know, our digital farm management tools are kind of SaaS, right? Classic SaaS. We sell them on a per acre monthly kind of thing. Okay. But there's in ag, I think, to be a successful ag tech entrepreneur, you have to have I'd say that service part of the SaaS thing, right? Like you have to have a high consultative portion of your business, right? Getting in there. The challenge is not often sales, but it's implementation, right? Getting in there, doing the change management and helping them with that change management to change these processes that are really ingrained.
Really? You could just take
really
a
ingrained.
Yeah. Getting a fourth generation farmer to change a process, that's hard.
It's tough, and it may be right that you have to build something and you really have to fit your stuff to their process, right? You have to, because and that's one thing, people drop in these tech solutions, but they only fix. It's just sort of like optimizing one part of the supply chain, but not looking at its effects. It's like you could break everything else if you just fix that part. So there's that. The drone part of it is really more like a tech-enabled service, right? We have pilots that go out and fly, sort of white label, analytics. So that we actually have a fleet of pilots and go out and do all that data collection. And then some of it's just truly consultative. Some of our advanced analytics projects where we're throwing our data scientists, have all this amazing insight at their information, trying to figure out if there's small kind of improvements they can make right now, right? Purely in the way that they operate, not using a new fertilizer, not using new varieties, not a new automation, but just can we change some of our business processes to kind of drive more to the bottom line?
Do they have do you provide a tablet or something, or you just put it on their own equipment? How do they log? What do they use to review everything?
Yeah. Phone and web is usually
Okay.
common. Sometimes we have tablets if that's the break point. Usually these are big enterprise growers. So if the thing they need is a tablet, like we'll get them a tablet, right?
Okay.
Like that's not. It is almost everybody has smartphones these days, including everybody out in the field. And it's about that match between the two. The joke in farming is sort of the like boots and the loafers guys, right? Is sort of the match. And you have to have kind of a suite of tools for both, right? Because there's not the same type of people. They don't see information in the same way. Some people are in the office and want to review it in a certain way. And other folks, like, they just need to fill out the information and see it snapshot as quickly as possible.
Are they going out and grabbing the lettuce or whatever and sampling it and putting that data into something, or is that always the drone employees from your side doing that, or a combination of both?
Combination of both. It really depends. There's some of our analytics don't require any drone flights at all, right? We're using weather data and historic information.
I see.
For us, it's really about, right, you pick the right tool for the job to get the information. And so the issue in ag right now is that so little of the information is digitized that you have to have some reliable sources of data. And so drone is nice because it provides an example of that, right? So if I'm flying iceberg lettuce, for example, I can get a stand count, a plant population. I can fly and automatically count every single plant, for example. That's a piece of reliable data that we know for certain, like it's definitely true. And so that's an example, but that doesn't mean that the in-field data collection isn't valuable too, right? So they can go out and say, here are the quality issues I'm seeing. So we try to merge the two of those. One thing we talk about, and you were talking about AI a little bit, I think a lot about, like, the way that the world should progress, hopefully, is that, AI is just another tool. It's going to be like your co-pilot when you're doing things, right? It's not here to replace you. It's here to help augment when you can make faster decisions, help you see information that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So that's what we try to do. And, and I'll just be, sometimes it goes really well. And sometimes implementation is really hard, right? Like we've had folks, they're like, yeah, like, I just don't care, right? They're just like, I've been doing this for 50 years. I don't need your help. I'm really good at it. I do it on my pen and paper and I'm fine. I'm like, you know what? Like, okay, like let's build a good relationship because maybe we can train the next group up, right? Like you just have to accept when you're like, that's not the right adopter for us, right? So
if you can get the most influential farmer at the local coffee shop to say he's using it, and he tells his buddies in the morning when they meet for coffee, boom, there you go. You got 5 more customers.
Yeah. Even better if he tells them in the morning, hey, this company just made me a bunch of money. That's the, so an example when we talk about the dynamic, and this is something folks don't think about, is, for instance, at the end of last year, the iceberg market went up 500% because there was a misplanting event and pretty heavy yield compression due to quality issues.
Okay.
So think about, like, the per, like, carton price of iceberg went from $9 to $90.
Okay. Wow.
In like a 1 to 2 month span, and then went back down. It's back down to like 9 or 12, right?
Okay.
Although it's going to go up again because of this flooding, so it's coming again. But the point there is that the growers who are capable of capturing, seeing, hey, we're all going to be short. I'm going to go plant in other geographies. Right now, all of a sudden, that spread is potential revenue, right? That's money you can bring in. So we were lucky that some growers that work with us were aggressive during that time, went and bought acreage in locations actually for more money than they felt comfortable, but then they made that spread, right? From, call it $12,000, $15,000 an acre to 65. If you do 100 acres a week, that's a lot of money. It's interesting in that way. Yeah.
And what's the model? Is it a monthly fee per acre? Like how do you bill them?
Yeah, so we generally bill people per crop acre is the term. So I think of it like a single, a planted crop on a piece of ground. So let's say, iceberg takes 90 days. We may charge them per crop acre, and then they get a second turn on that same land. We charge them again. That's another crop acre.
I see.
Some folks just pay like an annual license. We end up kind of like figuring out the total number of acres. One of the difficulties in ag is that there aren't a lot of other software systems they're using that I can say, okay, well, what do you charge? The other one is, growers love to save money, right? They're good at it. So if you charge them like per seat, for example, they'll keep people off the platform that could really be useful for both, integration. The people need to be on there to get information because they're like, well, I'm saving $35 a month. I'm like, okay, well, we should get that person on there. So we try not to charge per user. We do have some annual licenses or monthly license if they're big enough and they want to negotiate in that way, that's fine too.
I see. And how can you said you're about to raise money, so you probably can't share a bunch, but how big are you guys so far? Where are you at in your life cycle of the company, like employee size, clients, revenue, whatever you can share?
Yeah. Well, we can share a lot of stuff, right? So what I'd say is we're sort of like late seed, early A sort of type thing. I'd say our problem right now is more about implementation. So we're actively in revenue. We have 9 active great growers in our system. I'd love to share who they are. I can't. I have pretty strict NDAs with growers, keep all their information kind of proprietary. But where we are, right, is it's less about scaling by lots and lots of growers and more about scaling within the growers, right? Getting all of their crops, all of their folks on there. We're about 22 folks, a mix of contractors and full-time folks. Really, this round is about hiring additional engineers to kind of build out those contracts, accelerate the delivery within the customers, as well as account reps that are there about that implementation, right? Being a person present that can say, hey, we're here to help you. Is your mobile app not working today? Let me get out in the field and kind of, really that client care piece. One thing we're always going to try to stay away from as best we can at GeoVisual is like heavy sales and marketing because I just don't think that model works very well for this market just yet. I think the market's too new and you really have to, I think that when people talk, you hear in software, well, what's your churn in software? You hear, what's your churn?
Yeah.
And my statement is if you turn off one of these clients in ag, you're not getting them back. They're not coming back to you, right? When they churn, you lose that relationship. And you may not just churn them, you may churn all of the other people at the coffee shop you mentioned, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is McGregor and Associates, is that the primary equity holder, or do you own 100%? Or
no, we don't own 100%. So that is our family office. We don't own 100%. There's obviously the original founder is in there, and then we have folks like RVC is involved, and RVF. Three Lines is in there. So we have a bunch of angels, and actually this round will be a mix of some smaller institutionals and some angels. I think one thing on that is it's been our experience. So, and it doesn't mean that there's only one way to do it. There's lots of ways to run a business, right? But it's been our experience that venture capital, like large institutional venture capital, the time frame and the exit values they expect don't really match ag very well. We watch these companies where they raise $30 million, $40 million at $200 million post money. I'm like, well, if you want a 10x exit, there's like 5 companies in the world that can buy you, right? It's like John Deere, Monsanto, Bayer, right? Like it's the same. Like they don't even care about lettuce, really, right? They care about corn. So we've been trying to keep our capital stack lean, and and so that we can open up those, so we continue to serve our market and keep our customers happy.
Offline, when we stop offline, I'll ask you some more about the current rounds you're raising and some people that I know that might be interested.
Would love to. Yeah, love it.
Your dad, is he involved? Does he come into the office? Or does he get like one day a week or play golf the rest? What's he doing?
No. Well, I could say, so he's our chairman and our CEO. He's heavily involved. I talked to him 4 times today already. So what I would say, the joke I tell is actually about my grandfather. So, I told you he was a peanut futures salesman. He did the last deal 2 days before he passed away at 95. This is the last contract.
What? Are you serious?
Wow. Yeah, and his best year ever was 93, ever. And actually, his year at 93 paid for all my grandmother retirement, all that stuff, right? I mean, we had people at his funeral saying, we're like, your grandfather made me more money last year than, he was 93. So I would say with Andrew, I don't think he can retire. I don't think he knows how. Like I've seen him in retirement mode, and he ends up attending every PTA meeting and trying to run it like a public company board meeting. So I wrote, like I've seen.
They see your dad. I can just see the parents like, oh shit, here comes Andrew.
So it's funny. At high school, they wanted to redo their strategic plan. And obviously that means something very specific to Andrew, right? He's like, yeah, that means, and they come in and they're all like talking. He's like, no, this is not how a strategic plan, so it's really fun. So I think he'll always be really involved. Obviously he's not doing the 14 hours of driving and all that other stuff, but I will say he's incredible. One, it's like having, for me, like having amazing guardrails, right? Like I can just run as fast as I can. And if I'm about to run off the cliff, he's like, whoa, right? And then secondly, right, there are times with some farmers that they want to talk to somebody else with gray hair, right? That
That's
understands
true. Right. Yeah.
time. And so it's
Yeah.
about matching the right people. And he can have those conversations. And so it's,
That's handy. That's
yeah. So
handy.
it reminds me back to water polo, right? It's like, hey, at GeoVisual, we don't care who scores as long as the team wins, right? So it's like you can shoot or I can shoot or I'll pass or I'll be sitting on the pool deck cheering you on, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's how we try to run it as a real team, right? The real
Does your
team
dad still have a little bit of a Texas accent? Does he say y'all and stuff like that, or no?
I probably say y'all more than he does, actually, which is,
Okay.
I don't know why that is, but a little bit. Most people can't pick up. He moves so much. It's definitely not like a heavy Southern accent.
I didn't. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the father-son relationship in a family-owned business can be tricky at times, no matter how much you love your dad, right? I mean, I don't care how great the relationship is. At times, it's weird,
Sure.
or whatever word you want to use, challenging. I don't know, whatever. Give me a good one. Give me a good story about a time where you've kind of had a little thing, and you're like, oh my God, dad's driving me crazy today. Something. Give me something. Anything? You got anything?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I'd say we generally do really, really well because I think it's just like any other relationship. You put work into all three kinds, right? We have work as a friendship, work as a partnership, work as a father-son team, right? And you have to put work into all those things. Luckily, we also have a therapist on staff, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's right. Your mom's like, okay, come on, guys.
I'd say, we're pretty good about really direct feedback. We'll get into it, right? If we disagree and then realize that, we have so much trust that we realize like, oh, this disagreement is only coming from a place of trying to do better. It's not like a personal issue, right?
There you go.
I will say, probably more like funny stories, right? Like, he's an older guy. And so he interacts with like Slack and email and all this. And some of his like things, he'll send like post messages are supposed to be personal messages in the general channel and I have to like delete them, like that happens sometimes. That kind of stuff, there's definitely things like that.
By the way, good looking guy. I looked your dad up on LinkedIn. I don't know how old that photo is, but I'm like, look, this guy looks like a model.
Yeah, well, my friends joke about him when we were in high school is that he looked like the most interesting man in the world from the Dos Equis commercials.
Yes, he does look like that.
Yeah, so, but no, I have to say, I wish I could tell you more stories of us like really getting after it multiple times.
Nothing major. Okay, well, that's good.
But it's really like, it really isn't like that. It's more like we're big on the disagree and commit. So if we have a big argument, and we turn around and we're like, look, I think this better than I do. You're closer. It's like, I disagree with you, but whatever, like, I trust that you have your best interest. And if it ends up going badly, we're not going to turn around and say like, see, I told you. So we're like, okay, that's a new problem to solve.
I got you. Were you, this may be too personal of a question. Were you able to put in family money, family office money, and then is there also Andrew money and Charles money?
Yes, that's true. I will admit my personal stake is a little bit lower. I don't have quite the reserve that he does. And then we have at GeoVisual multiple times over the course of the business.
That's great.
Done deferred compensation, right? I've taken no salary before, and those kinds of things were necessary, and taken deferred compensation, and done sweat equity and all that. So we definitely done
that's
that.
great. Well, being involved in a family business is challenging for any family, and the fact that you've been doing it for this long. And I'm sure you talk about other investments that the family has, and you're probably tied together in many ways, right? So the fact that it's going that well, kudos, and you've been able to raise cash. How much have you raised total so far? Can you share?
So we've raised $1.3 million in a seed round in 2017, 2018, and then been able to steward that capital effectively all the way through. A very interesting dynamic in the last 3-4 years. It's been kind of weird in COVID, but the other one is we have a lot of institutional fundings for institutional contracts from like NASA, USDA.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
So we've gotten $4.8 million of institutional contracts over that.
Wonderful. Okay. So you're actually able to pay yourself. You're not still. Are you taking a salary? I hope you're taking a salary.
Yes, okay. Minimally. It's smaller than I'd make maybe working somewhere else, but but that's okay. So no, and back, and back to talking about like Andrew. I mean, really, I think I can't tell you. I doubt this relationship works very well in a lot of other places, and I can see how it could be really difficult.
Yes, I've seen it.
But I think it's just like anything else, right? Like if you don't invest, like both of my parents invested incredibly heavily in our relationship, not only as a parent-child, but friendships, human beings. early. And it's like, well, you can't go from not doing that with your kids and then expect them to work in your business and that's going to go well, right? Like, of course not.
So true. So
Yeah,
true.
and I see that all the time, right? I mean, they're like, "Oh yeah, we were terrible as father son, but like somehow we're going to be able to run this business effectively, and it definitely won't damage any of our conversations in front of employees. Or yeah, that will never go badly, right? Like, of course, right?
Hey, kudos to your mom and dad. I hope they get a chance to listen to this interview too, because it sounds like they did a wonderful job. So hats off to them. How about yourself, man? Are you married, kids, social life, relationships, partners? Give me something. What's going on?
Yeah. So, not married, no relationship at the moment. Although all my friends are getting married. I think I attended like 12 weddings last year. So I guess it's not top of mind. It's not my main concern, but it's definitely I'm of that time frame. Everyone's going through their first
Okay.
weddings. I hope
Okay.
that it's their only weddings as well. I mean, it's been great. I love it when I love when my friends fall in love. It's great. Really, truthfully, for me, I'm so focused on the business. I don't have tons of time for new relationships, but I am really lucky. I have a really great set of friends, and kind of all through California and all around from high school that I get to see multiple times a year, and
Okay.
make sure that they make sure that they call me every so often. They're like, "Have you been working? Did you work on last Saturday? Did you also work on Sunday? You need to go out with us. You need to come and visit." So they keep me from being too much of a workaholic. So that's
There's
good.
another podcast episode, entrepreneurs that work themselves into the ground. You got to make sure you take some time off. What is your downtime like? Okay, I'm going to check out. I'm going to check out and go.
Yeah,
What is
totally.
your hobby? Yeah. What is it? Your
Yeah,
hobby?
well, so it's interesting because I talk about this a lot, in terms of burnout. I talk about their employees because I think the really important thing is how much time you spend not working. It's that every hour you spend not working, you're truly doing something that recharges you, right? Because I know people, they're like, I only work, they're like, I have 4 hours of free time every day. I'm like, what do you do with that for? So like, I watch TV and I don't feel recharged. I'm like, well, maybe TV isn't what recharges you, right? Like maybe it does. I don't know. You may love TV. I don't know. So my hobby, like I really like going, like hiking around. I love backpacking. I've been able to do that as much. The gym, like the gym and swimming, like that being outside. I can swim outside in the pool. That's a big one. My
Yeah.
big hobbies, I love reading and I love cooking. Those are like my two big things.
Oh, you can cook pretty good.
So
Okay, you're a good cook. All right.
I don't know if I'm a good cook. I love cooking. I think the food I make tastes pretty good. And it was a big family thing for us. We always like, even when Andrew's working really hard, Herman Miller, he was always back for dinner. Dinner has always been like a big thing for our family. We always had dinners together. So I do love cooking. And I love reading about cooking and all of that. So
That's
that's
cool.
one of those ways that, both I think the exercise piece and that are two good ways for me to recharge. And actually I love part of my favorite social thing is like cooking with people. Like I love getting together and making meals and having a couple of bottles of wine and laughing and telling stories. Right. So that's my recharge. I know a lot of folks that they don't feel recharged and they're like, well, what did you do this weekend? They're like, well, I was on social media for most of the time. And then I went out to a bar that I didn't like with a bunch of people I don't know that well. I'm like, well, that's probably why you don't feel recharged. Right. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. If you're on Twitter and TikTok for 4 hours a day and it's enraging you, that's why you're not feeling recharged, to like stop looking at it.
I will actually say I don't have any social media. I mean, I have Facebook. I think that I logged onto it last time like 4 months ago. I use it to keep in touch with my college buddies who live in India, right? They have WhatsApp and all that stuff. But it's just, I can send, even on LinkedIn, to be honest, right? Like you read all these posts, these sort of like humble brags on LinkedIn. This like, those humble bragging posts are like, this is really, I hope I can say this on this podcast. I call them struggle porn, where people talk about like, like, I worked 90 hours and never slept and it's like, no one cares, man. Like, and so I read all this and I'm like, one of my growers said this the other day. And I know it's really counter, but it's shrink your world a little bit, right? Like I read these people, they get so angry about what these people are doing or like what's going on LinkedIn. I'm like, none of that is stuff that I can make better. I'm going to focus on my little part, my circle of influence, and anything that's outside of that, like leave me alone. And it's made me a happier person. It was really valuable during COVID. So
great advice. Yeah, I did notice your LinkedIn profile was not super active because I was trying to study you and I was trying to find you and stuff, this morning. And I did notice
I've been called out by my employees that I could maybe do a little bit better on that, which I think is we have two employees, Karen and Valerie, who have been. They're like, hey, maybe we could just like up our kind of messaging a little bit.
I guess I would have to, first of all, I love everything you said about how to make yourself, a little more smaller on the social media front. And it does help when you're in the middle of a cash raise though, for a startup business. but sometimes it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I have a call with a PR firm later on about this a little bit. I think it's what I am very personally resistant to it. So I think you have to track, it's just like anything else, right? You track your personal resistancies and biases.
Yes.
And there is a way to do it in a healthy way. And I absolutely am willing to do it for the business, right? Anything that's helpful for the business, I will add. But see, personally, I have no interest. Like, I don't want to be on. I remember when Snapchat came out, I was in college, and first thing I got is like some picture of my friend's face, making some stupid face. And I was like, delete. Like, I was like, I don't know. I was like, this is just noise. Like, like I'm out. And it's funny because I actually feel closer to my friends that way, because we have, like, they
Real
expect to get a hold of me. They expect to get a hold of me in like a normal pathway versus like they're like, did you see my Snapchat? I'm like, no, because I don't have
no.
So no, I didn't.
You said a key thing earlier for the business. I have friends and family here in town. They'll see me, and sometimes they'll make comments because I'm on social media enough to promote Riderflex, right? Like almost 99% of my posts, even if it looks a little bit personal, the Riderflex is in there, right? I'm trying to
totally
promote the business. And I'm always telling them, I'm like, look, man, I'm not on social media because I like doing this shit. I'm on social media to promote my recruiting firm. Like,
yeah, it's for business.
It's for business.
I think the thing you have to be careful of, and it sounds like you don't have this problem, and I hope I don't either, but one thing that has made me sad, I grew up idolizing Andrew, who's an operator, right? Like, he operates. And I watch these other truly amazing people, clearly much smarter than I am, the Elon Musk, whatever, that are all over Twitter, all this. And I'm like, when do you have time to run your business?
I don't know.
And maybe you just don't sleep. Maybe he's just who knows? But
he's a robot. He's a robot.
But my thing with them is like that to me is about ego. Like, he's not doing that for Tesla and all that anymore. Yeah. He's doing that in part for himself. And that's the part where I think it shifts. And I wish we'd stop celebritizing like executives.
Ego moves.
Because the thing I love is when the executive does an amazing thing, to celebritize the business and all the successful people and the employees and the implementation of which they're a part. But this like celebritization of the CEO is insane to me. I'm like, your job as like a COO is to operate. Like, I don't care if you have 10 million Twitter followers, right? Like, if your margins are 0.25% and you're not profitable, like, I don't care. Like, right?
That's good. So that is so good, right there. That is perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Real quick, I know we're almost out of time. So GeoVisual-Analytics.com. Anything else you want to mention as far as how to get a hold of you, if they're interested in the cash raise, anything else, or just go to the website, contact form?
Go on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can definitely message me there, counter to all the social media. I definitely respond to those. Okay. You can go on the info form as well. And I'd say, if there are growers listening to us, we'd love to have conversations, especially even if we don't do your main crops. If you want to talk, I'd say another big one is if you're a retailer, right? You're somebody who, and you think that we can help you form better partnerships with your suppliers. We'd love to talk to those folks. And then, of course, I'd say, any investor that wants their money to have kind of that triple bottom line, right? Where it's not just the returns, which of course we want, but it's also about putting your money to something that I think we really legitimately need. We'd love to talk with them. And then I'd say the biggest one is if you are a software engineer, full stack engineer, or a data scientist, you want a great place to work, please give me a call.
Perfect. Charles, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. It was a pleasure.